بكت عيني بكت عيني بكت عيني على ذنبي وما لاقيت من كربي فيا ذلي ويا خجلي إذا ما قال لي ربي أما استحييته تعصيني ولا تخشى من العتب.
All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who knows what the hearts conceal and what the tongue shall not reveal, in front of whom all kneel, and on the day of judgment to whom all shall appeal. The study of Andalus is a topic that intrigues every single one of us. When we hear it, we're fascinated. Why is that the case? Because generally speaking, many people are not interested in history. But for some reason, Andalus strikes a chord. The reason for this is that Andalus represents the most successful intermixing of East and West in the entire civilization before our time. Andalus represents Islam as practiced in Europe. It is European and Western Islam. And so especially for us here in America and all across the Western world, Andalus represents a glorious past that gives us actually hope for the future. If Islam survived, not just survived, thrived, not just thrived, reached its pinnacle and superseded everything in Europe when it was based in Europe, then surely there's hope for us here now. As well, Andalus represents for us a lesson in every facet of history. The conquest, the rise, the glory, the civilization, the knowledge, and also the fall and the internal bickering and the civil wars and the backstabbing and the alliances with kafir regimes against other kafir regimes, and we are stuck in the middle like a pawn. Literally, Andalus is like a microcosm of what we are facing right now. And that is why I feel very, very passionate about this topic. It's one of the topics I really love immensely. I've taken at least half a dozen trips to Andalus, and I take tours. Inshallah, I'll be going again. This year I'm going to Morocco. Next year, inshallah, I'll be taking a tour to Andalus as usual. Before COVID, I'll go almost every single year, especially for our youth. It really makes them understand what is the reality of Islam in the West. And there's no dichotomy. You don't have to be East versus West. No, you can be a Western Muslim, and Andalus demonstrates this. Now, what can we accomplish in 1 hour? What can we accomplish in one seminar, one session? Not much. We're not going to go over the chronological order, but the point is to really make us start thinking and to incite within us a passion. Because the books are all there, the lectures are all there, but we need a motivation to go read those books. We need a motivation to listen to 5, 10, 20 hours of lectures online. So the goal of today's brief, 45 minutes, then Q&A inshallah, is really to spark that curiosity and to give us the impetus, to give us the motivation that, you know what, I want to study this region and I want to benefit from the realities of the rise and fall of Western Islam. And subhanAllah, it's not just Western Islam and Andalusia. Overall, the Quran always preaches to us through history. 1/3 of the Quran is in fact nothing but qisas stories. 1/3 of the Quran. 1/3 is laws and 1/3 is theology. The entire Quran, 1/3 is stories. Why? لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ عِبْرَةٌ. There are lessons in the stories of the past. And Allah tells us, قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانظُرُوا. Go travel in the land and look at what happened to the people before you. Look at their remnants. Allah says in the Quran, go look at their remnants. Look at what they have left behind and take a lesson from that. So Allah is telling us to explore. And that's why, by the way, I'm a strong advocate of Islamic tourism. I'm a strong advocate. Yes, we should have fun with our families. Yes, we should go. But rather than just go to the, fun and sun and games, let's go to a place that, yes, there's a lot of interesting things, but also intellectual stimulation. I'm a big advocate that that's one of the best ways our families come together. We go to places where we study the past. Uzbekistan, and once when China goes back to normal, maybe go to China. I've been to China in the past as well. All of these lands we go to, Islamic tour of Egypt, go in and connect with our civilization. And one of the places we need to connect to is Andalus. Now, I'm not going to give you a long rundown, but there are some basic facts that we should all be aware of. These basic facts, we can divide the study of Andalus into a number of broad eras, okay? Broad eras. So inshallah we can figure this out, broad eras. The first era is the establishment of Andalus as a province within the broader Islamic empire. And this era begins in, very easy date to remember, especially the elders amongst you, maybe the youngsters don't know, but 711. Elders all know what 711 used to be back in the 80s and 90s, but I think the youngsters don't know. Do you know what 711 is? What is 711? One of the stores, yeah, so 7-Eleven. Okay, so this is the date. By the way, this is called a mnemonic device. You should figure out how to memorize dates by these mnemonic devices. 7-Eleven is the beginning of Islam in Andalusia. And we can go all the way to around 950 for first era. This is very broad, like basic introduction to Andalusian history. This is the establishment of Islam as an emirate, as a province. So Andalus, was a province within the broader Muslim empire. And of course, 711 is when Andalusia, it was called Andalusia, by the way. The term Andalusia, by the way, it is from the Roman. And before that, from the ancient local regions. One of the Germanic tribes invaded in ancient Roman times to this region. And that Germanic tribe, they were called the Vandals. Vandals. And every history student knows the Vandals. The Vandals invaded and conquered Andalus. The people of Andalus, the Spanish people, the original people, didn't have V. So they called the people that were invading Andalus, not Vandals, Andals. Andals. And when they called them Andals, then they called the land after them, the land of the Andals, Andalusia. That was in their region, in their language. So when the Muslims came, they took this name and they Arabicized it, Andalus. Andalus. This is where the term comes from Vandals. You all know what vandalism, the term vandalism, right? You all know what vandalism means, right? Why does vandalism come from Vandals? I'm a linguist as well. I love these little quirks of history. When the Vandals invaded a particular European city, the first thing they would do would be to deface and destroy iconic sites, vandalism. So the term vandalism comes from Vandals. And the term Andalusia is therefore linked to vandalism indirectly. Anyway, that's a little tidbit of history. So 711 is when the famous general Tariq ibn Ziyad, we all know the story, Tariq ibn Ziyad. He was a young general, maybe 19, 20 years old. Gathers together the forces, especially the Berber Arabs of North Africa, and they cross over the straits from Maghrib, from Morocco. They cross over, they land on that little land, the little island that probably didn't have a well-known name before. Jabal Tariq, it was called the Gibraltar as we call it now, Jabal Tariq. You can see Jabal Tariq from Morocco. From Morocco, you can see Jabal Tariq. And from Jabal Tariq, you can see Morocco. It's a two-way vision over there. And so he lands on Jabal Tariq, well-known, and he begins conquering. Now, why did he begin conquering this region? A number of stories are told. Most likely, one of the local kings by the name of King Roderick was greatly despised. This is a story that is found in our books of history. And one of his prime ministers revolted against the king. And he tried to do a coup d'etat against the king who everybody hated, the standard tyrannical king. He was caught and he was going to be executed. This prime minister managed to escape and flee for his life. And he fled down south to the land of the Umayyads, the Umayyad region in North Africa. And he went to the governor, Musa ibn Uqba, and he said to the governor, hey, I'm the prime minister. Coup d'etat failed. We hate our King Roderick. We are more than happy to let you invade. And you take over. We know you guys are going to have less taxes, more freedom. Pause here, footnote. There was a lot of religious tension between the Christians, as you're probably aware. And various segments of Christianity could not practice freely under other segments. And the Christians knew that the Muslims didn't care if you're Ahl Kitab, you're going to be able to worship. And they're not going to care which version of Ahl Kitab are you. So the prime minister basically comes, one of the main ministers, and says to the king, or says to the ruler Musa ibn Uqba, he says, look, you guys invade, and I'm going to be your guide. I'll tell you exactly what you need to do. I mean, he's the minister. He knows exactly what needs to be done, where to invade from, what day, what forces, everything. He became a traitor to his king, thinking he's going to do good to his people, and it did bring good to his people. And that's why modern Western historians point out that when the Muslims, quote unquote, invaded, in reality, the people did not stop them from invading. The people of the land. That's why Tariq ibn Ziyad barely had, when he landed, he had a few thousand. And within a few months, he got another few thousand. You cannot conquer Europe with 10,000 people. It's not possible. You cannot conquer Spain with 10,000 people. It's not humanly possible. Tariq ibn Ziyad did it. Why and how? This is how Allah works. This is the junud Allah. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ جُنُودَ رَبِّكَ إِلَّا هُ. When Allah wants to do something, mysterious ways happen and beyond your control. There's no human way that a small army of 5,000 people initially, then another 5,000 reinforcements, can conquer the entirety of Spain. Because the Muslims, within 20 years, they reached Madrid. A lot of people don't know this. They reached Madrid. Madrid, way up there. They had all of Spain. They even reached 100 miles from Paris. A lot of people don't know this. The Muslim army reached all the way outside of Paris in a very famous battle called the Battle of Tours. And the Battle of Tours is when, long story short, that's when the Muslim progress into Europe was stopped, and the Muslims then basically receded back until they had the southern part of Spain. But for a few decades, they controlled not just Spain, all the way up to France. There was an article in BBC, by the way, last year. You can look this up. They uncovered a group of a graveyard 100 miles outside of France where Muslims were buried. How did they know they were Muslims? All the bodies were buried facing parallel to Mecca, with the heads facing Mecca. They found little settlements. This is in the heart of France. They found settlements of the Arabs for those few decades. There was no pushback. The people wanted Muslims to come for one simple reason, not because they loved Islam per se, but they knew that Muslims would give them better justice and better system and less taxation and more freedoms. And in the end of the day, what does the average person want? Just the peace to live. They want society to allow them to live. And the Christians of that time frame fully knew that this king of ours under the Pope is not going to give us our religious freedoms. Their version of Christianity was slightly different. They weren't Catholics. They were a different North African version, including some Aryans, by the way. Anyway, let's not go down that tangent. Too many tangents. Sometimes I speak and I don't remember where I'm going. What was I saying before I went into this? What was I saying? They went all the way to France and then they came back. So then southern Europe was conquered. This is 711. Now, the sad reality, Andalus was not given the attention by the Umayyads that it deserved. Why is this the case? You're in Europe. Oh, Umayyads, how can you not care about Andalus? Multiple reasons. First and foremost, Europe in 700 CE was literally one of the most backward places in the world. You have to understand, Europe was not something, civilization was not in Europe. London at the time probably had 5,000 people living in it. That's it. And London was still pagan. Half of it was pagan. 700 CE, you still had Christianity, wasn't even the norm. You had pagan emperors and you had Christianity battling it out. So when we say Europe, you have to understand, Europe, it was nothing for the time frame. The civilization of the world was Byzantium. Byzantium, which is now Istanbul. That's where Eastern Europe, Christianity, not Western. Again, long story, but Western Christianity, the Catholics and then the Protestants, Western Christianity only began to rise and gain dominance after the Crusades. Pre-Crusades, Western Christianity is nothing. It's not worth your attention. Why should the Umayyads pay attention? It's literally a backward land. Literally barbarians. The term barbarians comes from this. The Huns of Germany and the Vandals. These are a bunch of barbarians. Nobody cares. And then number two, the Umayyads had enough trouble in their side of the world as well. Back in Damascus, what's happening? In 710, 720, 730, the Abbasids are on the rise. And it's only a matter of time. 752, the Abbasids overtaken, the Umayyads got thrown over. Civil war as usual. This is the reality of politics, right? So the Umayyads have enough on their plates to deal with. They don't worry about Andalus. And so what happens? Andalus becomes somewhat of an independent principality. It's not given the attention it's due. And that's one of the main causes for why the Muslims did not go up north, believe it or not. Again, all of these what-if moments in history. If the Umayyads had paid attention and understood the importance, it is very, very likely that all of Europe would be a Muslim land today. Like Andalusia was for so long, 800 years. It was very likely. But Allah's qadr, and we accept Allah's qadr. We accept Allah's qadr for wisdom known to Him. So, because of the politics, actually Musa ibn Uqba, the governor, and Tariq ibn Ziyad, the general, were actually called back. They were rebuked and humiliated for internal reasons. Again, the reality of the ummah, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I've said this many times, that beginning students of history, innocent Muslims, they think our past is all rosy and glorious. They have a very romanticized notion of the past. And I want to be blunt here. No, our religion is divine. Our history is very human. Our religion is divine. Our history is human. And you have the good and the bad. You have the beautiful and the ugly. You have the positive and the negative. Every negative you can think of, you'll find it. And every positive as well, you'll find it. So when you read history, you have to understand, history is a learning technique and a lesson. That's one of the reasons to learn history, to not mistake, to not perform the same mistakes of the past, right? The problem is, as the famous German philosopher Goethe said, the problem of history is that one thing we learn from history is that nobody learns from history. One thing we learn from history teaches us that nobody actually studies from history. The same mistakes are repeated over and over and over and over again by every civilization, including our own. Every civilization, every single dynasty, every superpower, the rise and the fall, same problem, same issues. Historians in their ivy towers understand and study, but the masses don't care. They don't care. They just go with the flow, and this is the reality even as we see it today. In any case, so Andalusia was given a very peripheral region, and it wasn't given the attention it was due. Now, Allah Azza wa Jal willed that lack of attention turned in its favor. How so? When the Abbasids came to power, 752 CE, they wanted to eliminate the opposition, and that's the Umayyad dynasty. And so they began massacring every single royal prince of the Umayyads. They were now in the hundreds, the Umayyad dynasty, the clan. And one of the most infamous massacres, they invited the Umayyads to a big feast and banquet. Again, nobody learns from history. This is the oldest tactic in the book, right? Free biryani, they'll still come. Doesn't matter, okay? Invite them to free meal, fancy meal, lock the door, everything. That's the way it goes, right? Standard story, literally, been there, done that. You never learn from history. So they did that. The royal family is being massacred. One of the minor princes, Abdurrahman I, one of the minor princes fled to Baghdad, far away. And he thought, khalas, I'm going to live the life now undercover. Okay, he's living now in Iraq. From where the Umayyads based? Who can tell me? Where are the Umayyads based? Damascus. Very good. Okay, you're a student of history. That's good. The Umayyads are based in Damascus. The Umayyad mosque is still standing to this day. One of these minor princes, Abdurrahman I, him and his mother and his brother and I think his sister as well, they go and live undercover. Nobody knows about them. Well, that's what they think. The Abbasids are getting free-for-all money. Give us, not money, what do you call it? Bribing. They're bribing the people. If you can tell us a prince, we'll give you the money. Tell us where they're living. Eventually, one of the people betrays him. And so, when they're washing clothes, living their daily life, whatever, one of the neighbors comes running and says, you better run away. I saw the troops coming. They're coming for you. Completely unprepared. So, Abdurrahman I and his younger brother, age of 13, he was 17, 18 at the time, his younger brother, 13, 14, held onto his hand, took a bag of gold, and they fled for their lives. This story, wallahi, it's as if it's out of the Arabian 1001 Nights. It's one of the most bizarre stories in our Islamic history, right? It deserves a full cartoon and even a movie. It deserves a full Hollywood movie. One of the most, it truly, now this story is definitely a romantic epic. It is an amazing reality. Long story short, his brother was killed in front of him. The Umayyads literally saw, the Abbasids literally saw him run for his life, swim over the Euphrates River, right? With his bag of gold in his mouth, like literally unbelievable, right? 5 years later, from Iraq, he makes it, from Iraq, put your map in your head, he makes his way to Andalus, undercover. 5 years it takes him to make his way from Iraq, Baghdad, all the way to Andalus, undercover. Nobody can betray him or else he's going to be killed. And along the way, he begins a call of insurrection against the Umayyads, against the Abbasids. He's royal blood. He is the great-grandson of Hisham, the Khalifa Hisham ibn Abdul Malik. He is from Hisham's line. So he is the grandson of Hisham, so the great-grandson of Abdul Malik. So Abdul Malik, one of the founders of the Umayyad dynasty, the one who built the Dome of the Rock, this is his great-great-grandson, you can say, right? So Abdurrahman I makes his way to Andalus. Now, his father is Hashimi, Umawi. His father is, back to, not Hashimi, Banu Umayyah. His father is Umawi, Qurashi, I should say, not Hashimi, Qurashi. The Abbasids are Hashimi, the Umayyads are not Hashimi. That's one of the sources of the conflict, right? The Abbasids are technically Hashimi, the Umayyads are not Hashimi, they are Qurashi, they are Banu Umayyah. So, Abdurrahman, his mother was North African Berber, and he spoke Berber fluently. And this is what he used to rally up the Berbers in North Africa, in Morocco, to rally up the Berbers to come under him against the Abbasids. You understand this point? He is Berber as well. His mother's Berber, Barbar. He speaks the language, he's ethnically, half there and whatnot. And he uses that. The Berbers don't like the Abbasids for many reasons. He uses that to overthrow the little governorate in Qurtuba, in Andalusia, and he establishes an independent Umayyad dynasty around 750 CE. So this is where Andalus breaks away from what? Guys, are you following or are you lost? Are you following? What does it break away from? The Abbasids. Andalus breaks away from the Abbasids and establishes independence under Abdurrahman I. And Abdurrahman I is therefore the founder of a new version 2 of the Umayyad dynasty. But based where? In Andalus. And they shall remain there for 350 years, the Umayyad dynasty. The Muslims for another 800 years, but the Andalusian dynasty, the Umayyad dynasty, he's the one who establishes there. And he establishes his base in Qurtuba, and he purchases the church, and he builds the grandest mosque known to mankind at that time, which is still standing to this day. Wallahi, it is mind-boggling if you think about it. 1,300 years old, and it's still standing. And it is a work of art to this day. When you see it, your jaw drops. It is so beautiful. A lot of you don't know this. Listen to me carefully. The architecture of Medina, those beautiful pillars and whatnot, right? It is taken from Qurtuba. It is not Madani originally, it is Qurtuban. That entire structure, when you walk into the Masjid of Qurtuba, the first reaction, hey, I'm in Medina now. No, Medina was taken from Qurtuba. The modern, masjid right now, the arches and the pillars and the, the designs and the motifs, right? It is taken straight from Qurtuba. Qurtuba was the one that began. When you look, you see all these pillars exactly the same, as far as the eye can see. He built the largest masjid in the world at the time, Abdurrahman I. And he established his base in Qurtuba, and it remained there for around 300 years. But he didn't declare himself to be the Khalifa. He simply said, we're an emirate. Or he said, basically, he didn't use any titles. He simply said, I'm the Sultan. Sultan is not the Khalifa. But the power is going to rise. And with that, the sense of independence. And so, again, I'm being very rough here with the dates. You don't have to memorize the dates. But roughly around 930, 940 CE, Christian era, one of his descendants, the great-great-grandson, call him Abdurrahman III. So these are simple names. Abdurrahman I, Abdurrahman III. Abdurrahman III, the pinnacle of Umayyad power, is now going to happen. Abdurrahman III throws off the shackles of being a minor minion and says, why should we not declare ourselves to be a what? A khilafah. I am the Khalifa of the Ummah. Abdurrahman III. Why should we follow the Abbasids? And when he opened this door, the Fatimids of Egypt followed suit, and they declared themselves to be the Khalifa as well. So for around 80 years, we had 3 Khalifas. One in Egypt, one in Andalusia, and one in Baghdad. So Abdurrahman III reached the pinnacle of Umayyad power, and he decided to build an entire city from scratch. And he named it after his favorite Milk Yamin or wife, Zahra. So it is called Madinatul Zahra. And it is still, half of it is standing to this day. When you go, you will see the pillars and the remnants of Madinatul Zahra over there. And this is considered to be the pinnacle of the Umayyad time frame. He minted coins in his name. Forget, I have my own. I don't need you guys. He minted coins in his name. I am a coin collector, and I quickly looked up. So this is one of the coins of Abdurrahman III. I'm a numismatist for the nerdy people in the audience. That's what nerdy guys do. I'm a numismatist. I collect coins. This is my passion and hobby. Well, along with scuba diving with sharks, but this is one of the things that I do. So I have hundreds of old coins, and I have a number of coins of Umayyad dynasty. This is an actual coin of Abdurrahman III when he minted it in Qurtuba. If you want to come see it afterwards, it's here inshallah to see. So he minted coins in his name. He also built a city, Madinatul Zahra, and he financed the largest library in the world at the time. The largest library in the world to outbeat the library of Baghdad. Because it's a matter of show. You have to show the people who we are. Build the largest masjid, build the largest madrasa, build the largest library, build the largest jami' and whatnot. They did this all. And he built a library, they say more than 500,000 books were there. Again, 500,000 for back in the day, handwritten books. These aren't printed copies, right? More than 500,000. But you see what happens with power, and we see this across the world all the time. When politics and when power corrupts, and when you want to flex your muscles and show who you are, all of these projects, who's going to finance them? You're building a city from scratch. That's going to cost the equivalent of $1 billion. Who's going to finance in the end of the day? Where's money going to come from? Tell me. Taxes. Taxes. So here you are living in your palaces with all of the, and when people see the palaces, this is the reality of muluk. All kings. And by the way, before you criticize and the worthy of criticism, simple question to you. Had you been born in the palace and your father was the king, how pious and righteous would you be? Just blunt question, think that. It is so easy to criticize the royals, and wallahi, they're worthy of criticism. No question about it. But I personally thank Allah that I wasn't born inside the palace. Because I don't know what I would have done if the keys of the country had been handed to me and said, oh, just because your father is the king, you're going to be the next king. Let's see how pious a person becomes then when you have access to that much wealth and that much power. Thank Allah that you have simple and easy lives. You don't have to answer to Allah for that type of corruption and whatnot. Easy to complain, but that type of power, we haven't been tested with it. In any case, power corrupts, absolutely. And absolute power corrupts absolutely as well. That's the reality. So, Abdurrahman III, indeed, he builds his city. But subhanAllah, within 35 years after his death, within 35 years, the city is ravaged and destroyed, not by outside forces, not by kuffars coming to invade, no, by local Muslims. The people of Qurtuba who are starving to death, and there's gold plating inside of the palace. What's going to happen? It's human nature. And these types of things are generic. We have, by the way, eyewitness accounts by Venetian ambassadors, European ambassadors who visited Madinat al-Zahra. Unbelievable. We're talking about 900 CE, way before Europe is anything. And there are peacock water clocks. A water clock built in the shape of a peacock that's telling you the time. There is running water in the city, the royal city. By the way, Madinat al-Zahra, do you think you could live there? No. This is for the elite, the crème de la crème. This is for the wealthy, the noblemen. This is for if you have blood, royal blood, or you're connected to the Rockefellers and the other giants of that nature. Then, if you're the Bill Gates, you can live there, yeah. But if you're me and you working for the Bill Gates, then no, you're going to be the servant and the worker over there. So what's going to happen? But we have eyewitness accounts. And when you visit Medina al-Zahra, even though it is completely in ruins, subhanAllah, but the foundation is there. No structure remains because the Muslims themselves, I mean, you don't really blame them, but it is what it is, right? They destroyed the city, took all the pillars, all the gold, whatnot. This shows us this is the beginning of the downfall. This is the beginning of the downfall. Simultaneous to this, another movement begins. And this movement is called the Spanish term of reconquer. The Spanish term is Reconquista. Reconquista. It's a Spanish term. Reconquista means reconquer. And this notion or this point of reconquering the lands of Andalus, it is contemporaneous to the crusades that are taking place in Jerusalem. You have to, a lot of people don't get this point. The notion of reconquering the Holy Lands, actually Andalus is sparked by the crusades and the crusades is sparked by Andalus. They are interconnected, intertwined. The notion of getting back our land is beginning at this time, around 1000 CE. 1020 CE. And the Reconquista of Andalus is what sparks the idea, if we're doing it there, we might as well try in Jerusalem, get back the land of Jesus himself. So we're not going to go down the Crusades, don't worry, this whole different tangent. But understand, the Crusades are actually linked theoretically to Andalus. And some of the people involved in Andalusia and the Reconquista went to Jerusalem to participate in that because the Pope said, if you reconquer southern Spain, Andalus, then you are a martyr. You are a crusader. And the term crusader, well, I got to mention this a little bit, sorry, but the term crusader, what the Pope said was, Pope Innocent III, who was not as innocent as his name suggests, Pope Innocent, he gave a fatwa. And their fatwas are binding on the Catholics. When the Pope gives a fatwa, it's not like me and you. My fatwa means nothing. Who cares if I said it? But according to Catholics, when the Pope speaks, it's not the Pope speaking, it is God himself, right? So when the Pope gives a fatwa, that is a verdict from God directly. And the Pope gave a fatwa that whoever undertakes a journey to reconquer Andalus or Jerusalem, automatically, as soon as you put the cross on you, that's what the crusader means. You put a cross on you. You know, the crusaders would put a cross on them. Once you put the cross on you and you're marching, no matter what happens, you have a plot in Jannah automatically. If you die, if you live, if you win, if you're not, no. You shall be a person of Jannah simply by participating in the crusade. So a religious fervor overtook the people in Andalus and across the world to go to Jerusalem. But in Andalus is what's important. And the Spanish locals of the north region began allying with each other and attacking Muslim lands. Long story short, the first city that they conquered was the city of Toledo, Ohio, no, Toledo, Andalus, okay? Toledo, Ohio is named after Toledo, Andalus. Toledo and Andalus, that's the original. Just like we have York and New York and, you know, New Michigan. All of this new is from England. Well, same thing with the Spanish names as well. Toledo, the original is in Andalus. And if you go to Toledo today, it is one of the most iconic cities in the world because they left the houses as they are. 1,000 years old. You see, as if you're back in Andalusia back in the time. Amazing, amazing. And Toledo was conquered in 1082, 1085, so very early on. And the Muslims were still all across Andalusia, southern Spain. So because the Muslims are still everywhere, and Toledo is kind of a border town between Christianity and Islam, the Christian empire allowed Muslims to live in Toledo. And they converted the universities to be Christian friendly. This is a very important point. Listen to this. All the universities were Arabic. They remained Arabic for a while. But of course, pre-Reconquista, the Muslims are, only the Muslims are studying. It's a madrasa. What is a university? It's a madrasa. It's a jami'ah. It's a madrasa. What are you going to study in a university? Sharia, fiqh, hadith, tafsir. That's what the law was. When you become a lawyer in early Islam, what is a lawyer? It's a faqih. Faqih, that's what a lawyer is, right? So the madrasas of the time were Islamic universities. Toledo became a Christian land with a large percentage of Muslims living in it. And the universities became Christian friendly. Eventually they started teaching in Latin, but for a while they're teaching in Arabic. And Christians are now coming to study. This sparks the first of what is called the translation movements. Pay attention to this. It's very important. Christianity was in the Dark Ages. Why? Because Christians believed that one should not study any sciences from any other peoples other than our pious priests. You cannot study science from the Greeks, from the Romans, from any other civilization. They're pagans. It is not allowed to study Aristotle, Plato, to study books of medicine. Galen has written a book on medicine. You shouldn't study that. They're, according to them, they're kuffars, right? Can't study from the kuffars. We still have the fundamentals of our time. They say the same thing about many sciences, but that's besides the point. We, generally speaking, our ulama never had a problem studying sciences from other people. We're not studying Sharia and fiqh, we're studying the sciences. As you know, we had no problem studying medicine, chemistry, mathematics, arithmetics, astronomy. We took the Greek sciences, we did, and we took the Greek physicians, and we built, and we multiplied, and we rose all the way to the heavens with their names and everything. We had no problem. We took science to a whole different level. Andalus is where it began, by the way. All these people you hear of Ibn al-Haytham and all of them, Andalus. All of these people of where is the blood coming from and what is the optics and al-Khawarizm, all of these, well not Khawarizm, sorry, not Khawarizm, but most of the people that we hear about, most of them, Ibn al-Haytham for sure, Abbas ibn Firnas, the guy who first started to fly. He wanted to fly, Abbas ibn Firnas. This is Andalus. There's a bridge outside of Qurtuba called Firnas Bridge to this day, because that's where he died, the guy with the wings. He tried to fly. We needed him to get to the right brothers. Inshallah, he died a shaheed for science. Like we needed to do something, start the process, you know what I'm saying? He went to the pillar and he tried to flap some wings, whatnot. Point being, Muslims reached literally the skies. And the Europeans are completely backward, completely Dark Ages. When does the light begin to shine in Europe? From Toledo in 1085. How so? This is when, for the first time, Europeans are now studying in Muslim institutions, Muslim books, Ibn Sina's Kitab al-Shifa, which is the standard textbook of medicine for 500 years, brothers and sisters. Can you believe Ibn Sina's Shifa was the standard textbook of medicine up until the 1700s? Can you believe? 1700s. The founding fathers of this country are alive, and Ibn Sina's book is being studied across Europe. Avicenna. And commentaries of Aristotle and Plato by people like Ibn Rushd, Averroes, by people like Al-Farabi, Al-Kindi. The Arabs had obviously mastered in studying them. So now in Toledo, for the first time in Christian history, far from the Pope, because Toledo is the very end of the world. The Pope cannot tell them no, it's too far away. What do they do in Toledo? They start what is called the translation movement. What is the translation movement? For the first time, the classics via Arab commentaries and Muslim shuruh are translated from Arabic into Latin. The first time, Latin is the lingua franca, everybody speaks Latin. Aristotle was not written in Latin. Plato did not write in Latin. They're writing in ancient Greek. Europeans don't know ancient Greek anymore. Where do they get it from? From the Arab commentaries of these sciences. The book of optics, the book of astronomy, the book of physics, the book of science, the book of medicine. All of these, the Muslims not only preserved, they wrote commentaries. They took it to a different level. And there's a good TED Talk, by the way, good TED Talk, 5 minutes long. Everybody should watch it. Where does the X come from in algebra? It's from the scene that the Spanish translated. Shaykh, something. They have the scene there, right? You can look it up. The X. Why do we have X in algebra? Why do we have it? From the Toledo translation movement. From this translation movement. And this translation movement, by the way, again, all of these are just miscellaneous facts, inshallah. The point is what is the point of today's lecture? Remind me. What's the point of today's lecture? What's the point? What's the gharad? What's the goal? to make people go and read on their own. I cannot cram 800 years of history in 45 minutes. What I can do, inshallah, is make you all so curious and so intrigued that you'll go home and you'll start reading on your own and listening on your own and insisting that people teach you the history of Andalus, and then inshallah accompanying people like myself and others to the land itself so that you'll continually become learners. Brothers and sisters, I will inshallah. Brothers and sisters, I have a phrase, I always say it. You don't have to be an alim, but don't remain a jahil. You don't have to be an alim, it's not wajib. And we need diversity. We need engineers, doctors, lawyers. We need everybody. But don't remain a jahil. Always learn. Always be a talib al-ilm. Always learn. Always. And Allah bless all of us with minds we can continuously learn until the day we pass away. So the point being that this translation, I was going to say another thing. The first time the Quran was translated into a European language was in Toledo. Toledo. The first time the Quran was translated into a European language was in Toledo. And the Pope, Pope Pius, who wasn't very pious, Pope Pius visited Toledo, and he saw that the students of the university all spoke fluent Arabic, even though they were Christians. And the Crusades were full swing taking place in Jerusalem. The Crusades are happening in Jerusalem. The Pope visits Toledo, and he sees these students studying in the seminary, and they're studying in Arabic. And so he comes across the idea, let us translate their holy book, not so that people convert, so that people, from his perspective, know how evil the enemy is. So we translated a very evil translation, a very bad light translation, and we want them to read in Latin what the Saracens, they call them at the time, say, what the Muslims say. And so he found one of the top students in the College of Medicine by the name of Robert from the British city of Ketton. So he is called Robert of Ketton. Robert of Ketton. Back in the day, they'd call themselves from the city. So this Robert of Ketton, who was a medical student, pause here, footnote, once upon a time, Europeans had to come to Muslim lands to study medicine. Literally. They had to come and study medicine in Andalus. Why? Because that's where medicine was taught, way better than anything in mainland Europe. So Robert of Ketton travels from England all the way to Andalusia to become a doctor. Little did he know the Pope is going to make a way and hijack him and basically say, forget being medicine, you have to translate the Quran. So he finds a local Shaykh, we still don't know his name because his name is not recorded. And with this help of the local Shaykh in Toledo, because remember, Toledo still had intermingling. Toledo, you still had Muslims and Christians living side by side for another 200-300 years. He finds a Shaykh and Alim, and that both of them, with the help of the Alim, with the Tafsir Jalalain and Al-Baydawi in particular, for some reason, I don't know why they liked Al-Baydawi there. So he translated the Quran into the first Latin translation. And this is the translation of Robert of Ketton, the first time. This, by the way, again, all of these bizarre look at how history is linked together. This exact translation was read 400 years later by none other than Martin Luther. Not Martin Luther King, I have a dream. No, guys. There's two Martin Luthers, okay? There's Martin Luther, the modern, the king, the African-American civil. There's the original Martin Luther, the one who began the Protestant movement. Break away from Christianity. America is a Protestant nation. The evangelicals are Protestant. They're not Catholic. Our founding fathers of this country were Protestants and Anglicans that wanted to run away from the Pope. That's why they're coming here and establishing 13 independent principalities. Each one of these provinces, each one of these states was a different version of Christianity because they thought we can't live under the church. We have to break away. So Martin Luther, the original, reads the Quran translated by Robert of Ketton in Toledo. And then all of a sudden, he begins preaching a different version of theology. Interesting. What does this version say? What is the difference between Protestants and Catholics? Well, number one, there's no Pope. Every person should go directly to God. Does that sound familiar to you guys? Number two, every one of us should be reading the Bible directly. I don't need to go, only the Shaykh can tell me the Quran. The Quran is meant for, the Bible, excuse me. I don't need to go to the priest to read the Bible. Why can't I read, if the Bible is the word of God, why can't I read the Bible directly? Does that sound familiar to all of us here? Number 3, one of the main points, he tacked those 95 theses on the church door. Number 3, what right does a pope have to forgive? Only God can forgive. Does that sound familiar? And on and on and on and on. Guys, do you see where I'm heading with this? Where did he get these ideas from? Go figure. Okay? All of these is linked together, guys. The entire split of Christianity, the entire breakaway of Protestant and Andalus plays a vital role here. Andalus is smack in the middle of this entire story of what is going on. Again, so much to say. Time is running out. Very quickly finish up here. So the Reconquista begins around 1050, 1080 with Toledo. And there's 2 phases of the Reconquest. Very briefly, there's 2 phases. The first phase lasts 200 years. So from 1050, I'm being very generic so that you memorize the dates, 1050 to 1250. In those 200 years, slowly but surely, every single Muslim city of Andalus is conquered. In 200 years, every city is conquered except one small province at the tip, and that is Granada. Granada is basically connected to, let's say, Gibraltar. Okay? Granada is the very tip. Why couldn't they conquer Granada? Because Granada had very strategically, is situated with a large mountain, the Sierra Nevada, the original Sierra Nevada, not the one in California. So again, all of the names here, we're very not original. We take it from the European stuff. The original Sierra Nevada, there's a series of mountains. And Granada is strategically fortified with those mountains. And also it has direct access to the ocean. So ships can come in with trade, with supplies. So you can't really lay siege to Granada. So Granada was very wealthy. And the Nasirid dynasty, 1250 or so, decided, you know what? We can't fight these Christians. Let's just pay tax to them. We got plenty of wealth. We got plenty of gold. Let's just eke out an existence. And they did for 200 years, 250 years. So the Reconquista was successful 80% till 1250. The entire Spain is reconquered back. And up until this point in time, Muslims are not persecuted by and large. They can't be because Granada is Muslim. We don't want to exacerbate our enemies. So Muslims are allowed to live. If they migrate, maybe a bit of pressure, extra taxes, but there's no massacres, there's no forced conversions. Why? Because there's a mini superpower of Granada next door. They don't want to make things difficult. So until 1250 or so, 1250, the Nasirid kingdom of Granada begins. The Al-Hamra, all of you are aware, this built by the Nasirids, right? Al-Hamra Palace, it's very much later after the Qurtuba Masjid. Qurtuba Masjid dates to 750 CE. Al-Hamra Palace, 1400 CE, 1350. Big difference, 700 years between the two. So Al-Hamra is a different version of Andalusian Islam. So the Nasirids remain 250 years, eking out an existence, paying taxes. But you know what, in the end of the day, subhanAllah, they have a huge, downfall, inner war, uncles against nephews, cousins fighting for power, standard stuff, standard civil war stuff, very, very dirty politics, literally brothers killing brothers and whatnot. As you expect, eventually certain brothers ally with people up north, i.e. the Christians, say, I'd rather have you than my brother in power. And so the internal war begins. Long story short, in 1492, Isabel and Ferdinand, two rulers of two large states that were at war with each other in Spain, decide to get married and unite their kingdoms. So remember, Spain is not one empire. It's lots of, just like Muslims are divided, they're also divided. The two largest principalities, it so happened you had a son and you had a daughter, and they decided, you know what, let's just marry these two so that the king and queen form a united kingdom. That united kingdom became so powerful, they can now put their attention down south to Granada. And that's exactly what happened. And in 1492, Ferdinand and Isabella, after 6 months laying siege to Granada, with the largest force ever to attack Granada, finally forced the last Nasirid Sultan, Abu Abdullah, or Bo Abdil as he's called, to hand over the keys of the city to Ferdinand and Isabella in 1492. Before I come back to the story, what happened? Well, Abu Abdullah the original treaty is still there. The original keys of the city are still there. You can see them in the palace. The original treaty has its main clause. The Sultan put in there, the Muslims shall not be persecuted. And the Muslims will have the right to worship and to pray and to wear the hijab and all of the sha'air of the deen. Nobody shall interfere with them. That's the only condition we have to surrender. All the conditions they have. Number one condition, you have to have all of these Muslims protected. And Ferdinand and Isabella, tafaddal, no problem, sign. And within 10 years, persecution, taxes. Within 30, 40 years, you can't live here as Muslims. Within another generation, the Spanish Inquisition begins. People are given a choice, convert or die. That's the choice, convert or die. Lots of massacres, lots of very evil, very nasty stories for the next 150 years. What happens? The Muslims have civil war, they fight. There's a number of insurrections, right? They flee from Granada. They start living in small principalities in the land. Al-Pukharra is one of the regions right outside of Granada. For 100 years, the Muslims live independently outside of the city of Granada, in the villages, in the forests and the trees. They're living there for 100 years. You still go there. We go there every single year. You find the last fortress of Al-Pukharra. They had the last stand for another 100 years. They're maintaining their Islamic identity until finally, even that is not allowed, so they are forced to convert, and these are called the Moriscos or the Mudajjar, Mudihars. They're forced to convert to Christianity. So for the next 150 years, you have a group of people whose ancestors were Muslims and who are forced to be Christian. Now, what's going to happen? They take their Islam and they hide it. And we are discovering a lot of interesting stories and anecdotes. This is in the 1600s now, 1600s. The last trial to take place in Spain against a quote-unquote crypto-Muslim, you will be shocked at the dates, 1722. 1722, somebody's brought to court, and what is the accusation? He's a secret Muslim. The founding fathers are here in Washington at that time. They're here in New York. And 1722, you still have crypto-Muslims. And they were not able to pass Islam down. However, many families, especially in the inner regions, are well aware that their ancestors were Muslim. I myself have met a few who found out that they were of those types of forced, and their great-great-grandmothers preserved something of Islam, some heritage. And so many of them converted back to Islam because of this. But khair, by and large, the majority are not, Arab and Muslim, but it's a very sad story. Perhaps the saddest, 1622, King Philip, I think it was. Don't quote me on the names and dates. By the way, this whole lecture is from memory, so I'm just saying, in case I made a mistake, please cut me some slack and don't have a long refutation video that I made a mistake. The concept is there, you know what I'm saying? Like, Yani Allah musta'an. It's, inshallah, if I made a mistake in the slip of the tongue by a name or a date, it's literally from the top of my head, it's memory here, so please understand. 1622, I think, King Philip, I'm not sure exactly, but roughly, perhaps the most painful. King Philip made a decree that all of these crypto-Muslims must be expelled to Morocco and Tunis. Perhaps 100,000. They were actually Muslims, but they would say they're Christian. Everybody knows this. Everybody knows this. The Inquisition would come, they would hide the Qurans under, they had special boards, right? One of the tests, by the way, of the Inquisition, really sad, and that's why if you ever go to Spain, listen to this, wherever you go in Andalus, you will find big slabs of ham just hanging from the wall in the restaurant. Why? Nowhere in Europe is this the case. Literally the leg of a pig hanging in the middle of the restaurant. Everywhere. I swear to you, you're going to be shocked. Everywhere you go, it's culture to have the leg of a pig in the middle of the restaurant. Why? This is one of the tests that they had. They would force one of these crypto-Muslims eat pork and drink wine. Now, what's going to happen if you force a Muslim to eat pork and drink wine? How's he going to react? Even if he does it, how's he going to react? He's going to vomit. It's going to vomit. I mean, I hope Allah has protected all of you from alcohol. It smells disgusting. And I hope, inshallah, nobody eats pork here. It is disgusting, really. The texture and the taste is utterly disgusting. And when a Muslim has never tasted it, and you put it in his mouth, he's going to gag. Blah, blah, he's going to gag. That's the test right there. If you're going to gag, execution. You're a secret Muslim. So they started hanging legs of pork and, pig and whatnot everywhere, so that when Muslims pass by, they might gag in the streets or whatever. And to this day, that culture is there. So they expelled over 100,000, but then the king, a'udhu billah, the very evil verdict, he said, hold on a sec, you adults, I don't want you here, but your children, we need them for the future. So the decree is, all of your children below the age of 10 or 12 or something are going to remain with us. Because 100,000 people, the world needs kids, babies, you know what I'm saying? You can't just expel half the city. So you adults, get out of here. Children shall be adopted by all of the families here. Horrific scenes. Wallahi, you read the books of history, your heart just, mothers separated from babies, parents never to be seen again, khalas, an entire generation. And those kids, what is going to happen? They're raised in Christian households, khalas, it's gone. And this was, it's a very smart and evil tactic, and it worked. It is. This is the end of lived Islam. 1622. Even for another 100 years, you still had, just by name, I know I'm Muslim. Wasn't good enough. 1722 was the last trial. And then, of course, Islam completely vanished from that region until it began again slowly but surely. Final point, inshallah ta'ala. With this, inshallah, we conclude and open the floor for Q&A. And then I think, inshallah, our Shaykh has an announcement to make. What year did Granada fall? What did I say? What year? 1492. What's your name? Ayyan. Ayyan, what else happened in 1492? Christopher Columbus reaches America. Where was Christopher Columbus? Spain. Interesting. So, 1492, it just so happens Christopher Columbus discovers America from Spain, and 1492, it just so happens Andalus falls. Coincidence? I think not. The first time I visited Andalus, I read books in Arabic about the history of Andalus. Big mistake. You never restrict yourself to one language. You always read what different sources say. Of course, the Arabic books, obviously, stopped at what year? 1492. Okay? So, I didn't know anything. This is the first time. Obviously, I've been like 10 times, but first time I went, I didn't know anything about 1492 connection, literally. So I'm in Granada, and the tour guide is showing what's the palace of the Al-Hamra Palace. And in one of the gardens of Al-Hamra Palace, to this day, there is a statue of Christopher Columbus in the palace of the Nasrid king. And the guide said, this statue of Christopher Columbus is where Christopher Columbus was standing when Ferdinand and Isabella accepted the surrender of Abu Abdullah and took the keys of the city. Christopher Columbus was standing right there. And my mind is going everywhere like, wait, what? It's just complete disconnect. What? What are you talking about? Christopher Columbus? What is he doing in this picture? At the time, I'd only read Arabic books, so what's going to happen? 1492, right? And so I said to the guide, hold on. Time. Christopher Columbus is here? What's he doing here? And she said, yeah, he was literally following Ferdinand and Isabella, place by place, battle by battle, begging for money for his fanciful project of going overseas. And it was only after they conquered Granada and they had access to the Muslim treasury, Exhibit A, they had access to the Muslim treasury, was he able to acquire the funds right here in this palace from the treasuries of Sultan what? Abu Abdullah, Abu Abdil, Sultan Abu Abdullah. And my mind is literally going everywhere. It's like, I just completely like awestruck, as they say. And I'm like, well, I mean, is there anything left? Can we go there? And she's like, yeah, well, there's a city an hour drive away where the Nina and the Pinta and whatnot were actually launched from. And the original structure where Christopher Columbus lived for 6 months is still there, including his desk and chair still over there. This is like 550 years old, right? Now, being the patriotic American that I am, right? Very patriotic, mashallah, tabarakallah. May Allah protect all those that are protecting the deen, and otherwise to otherwise, inshallah. Where was I? La Rabida. So, being the patriotic American that I am, I said, I got to see this La Rabida. I got to see this. I got to change my itinerary and got to see this. Took a rental car, drove down to this lazy village. Maybe 100 people live there. No idea, I'm like nothing, you know. Small little village in the middle of nowhere, La Rabida. And find, you know, figure out where it is and find this little monastery. Not a single tourist. I'm the only tourist walking in, okay? And there's a lady there selling the ticket. And I purchased the ticket. She looks up to me, at me. She starts speaking, you know, fluent Spanish, all excited, okay? I'm like, you know, I'm from Texas, but no si habla español, man. Si habla Urdu. No si habla español, man. So she's trying to explain something to me, really excited. And in her broken Spanish and English and whatnot, she asked me, are you Muslim? And I said, yes, I'm a Muslim. I'm a Muslim, yeah, I'm a Muslim. So she said, this church used to be La Mesquite, a mosque. And she was so excited, she became a tour guide from the ticket office. There was nobody there, it's one room. She took me in and she showed me, this is where the mihrab used to be. This is where the minaret, you see the minaret, they cut it off and put the cross, you see the minaret, whatnot, right? And again, my mind is just exploding. Christopher Columbus lived in a masjid, planned the charts out. Now, of course, he was a man, so when he got lost, he didn't ask for directions. That's understood, okay? That's totally understandable. He's a man, we cut him some slack. Lost halfway across the world, don't dare ask for directions. Think you're in India, no problem, okay. Still, he made his plans in a masjid. And then she's like, La Rabida, Arabic term, La Rabida. Like, what do you mean Arabic? I looked it up. Al-Rabita, Madinatul Rabita, La Rabida. The connection was just mind-boggling. It's not a coincidence that Andalus falls in 1492 and America is discovered in 1492. It's not a random coincidence. There's a direct causal linkage, literally causal linkage. We would not be here. This country would not be here. This land would not be here. Europeans would not be here. Whether that's a good or bad thing, I'm not going to go down there. But this land would not be here had it not been for the 1492 connection with the land of Andalus. Do you now see why we should study history? Do you now understand the connections and the interconnectivity and how everything is somehow beautifully linked together? And subhanAllah, we as a Muslim ummah contributed so much at every single stage. Wallahi, we have so much to be proud of. And yes, some things not to be proud of as well. We learn from those as well, so not to repeat. But we have so much to be proud of. Islam flourished in the heart of Europe. And it would have flourished forever had it not been for our own downfalls and our own intrigues and our own interfighting, which I didn't get into even more so. It would have flourished. It was the primary cause of downfall. We ourselves, bickering amongst ourselves, fighting amongst ourselves. And what happens, happens. So in any case, there are many good books that one can find about Andalus. The most famous one, written almost 30, 40 years ago, let me just get the title for you. It is Harvey's book about Muslim Spain. It's called Muslim Spain. Harvey's book, Muslim Spain. And I'll get you some other titles as well. I have so many books at home, so I forgot which one is the one I would recommend for when you start. But L.P. Harvey has one of the classics. And also Maria... Oh, I forgot the name. I'll have to look it up. I'm trying to see if I can find it here. I'll have to look it up. But there's a book that one of the professors at Yale had written. Here it is. It's called The Ornament of the World. This is the book. The Ornament of the World by Maria Rosa Menocal. Menocal. This is one of the best simple introductions to the history of Muslims in Andalus. I keep on saying one final point, just one final point, inshallah. Then I'm done, inshallah. I promise, inshallah. One of the things that fascinates me the most about Andalus is that Andalusian Islam was very different than the Islam and the intellectual ulama and the thinkers of mainstream ummah. We had some of the most exotic and brightest and unique minds in Andalus. Al-Qurtubi from Cordova, Qurtubi. Ibn Hazm from Andalus. You had some of the great minds, the thinkers, Ash-Shatibi, both Sahib al-Maqasid and Sahib al-Qira'at. Ash-Shatibi are both Shatibis are from Andalus. Ya Shaykh, with utmost love and respect, at 500 Hijri, 500 CE, 600, 700, 800, 500 Hijri, Masr didn't have ulama. Masr only had after the time of the Mamalik. It was only after the Mamluks where Egypt began to rise in ilm, Ibn Hajar type of era. Before this time, it didn't have that intellectual, with utmost, I'm being honest here, just like India, it didn't have the type of ulama until, for example, Shah Waliullah and before him. You had a few sparks that sparked an entire revolution. Ahmad Sayyid Hindi was one of the main founders of Indian intellectual Islam, right? Before Ahmad Sayyid Hindi, we didn't have that type of independent thought. Anyway, these are all separate. What I'm talking about, Andalus. Andalusian intellectual ilm was so unique, so different. Not just ilm of science and technology, but ilm of Islam. We had some of the most interesting minds of the ummah in Andalus. Why? What was different about Andalus? Andalus was never majority Muslim. It's true, I'm just telling you a fact. At max, Qurtuba was 50% Muslim. At max. And most of the countryside, 80% Christian. The ruling power Muslim, like India, the Mughals, the ruling power Muslim, but the bulk of the people, 30, 40, 50%, remain Christian. Maybe in some small places, but in the larger cities, 60% Muslim, maybe, yeah. But the smaller villages and whatnot, in that intermixing of cultures and give and take of different civilizations, the mind forms a totally different understanding. And what you come forth with, and every kharij of every Jama Islamiyya knows this. You are a graduate of Al-Azhar. The way you're thinking now in America, you would never have thought 1,000 years if you remained in Egypt. I know this because I was in Medina. If I remained in Medina, that bubble, that's why people don't like me, because I'm not in that bubble. But anyway, if I remained in that bubble, you don't think like this. You are forced to think outside the bubble and outside the box, right? That's what our ulama of Andalusia did. And to me, this gives me hope for the ummah in Western lands. Because the types of challenges we have in America, in Canada, in Australia, in England, in Europe, are radically different. I'm not saying they're better challenges. I'm just being frank here. It's a different set of challenges. And the people that are going to have to respond to those challenges, they cannot be ulama from Azhar or Medina or Timbuktu. It's not going to happen. You have to have people who understand what's happening locally to answer to those challenges. And therefore, this gives me hope and it inspires me. It happened in the past. We had the best and brightest minds in Andalus, the most unique, the most exotic, the most thinking outside the box. Why? Because society in Andalus was not like Baghdad. It was not like Qahira. It was not like Damascus. It was a different land. And similarly, if you look at what's happening in the Gharb, in the West right now, and the types of du'at and preachers that are coming, again, I'm just being honest here, they're very different than the preachers of the East. Very different. I'm just being honest. A lot of people don't like that differences. That's why there's so much tension. So be it. I am who I am and others are who they are, and I'm not planning to change. I think this is the future. We have to rethink through the challenges of the East. If you listen to my talks, you listen to my khutbah and durus, we can't preach people sectarianism and this firqa and that madhab. SubhanAllah. We have to move beyond this. We have challenges that are so different. Our children are leaving the faith, and you want me to teach you to hate another firqa, to find another mosque and say they're wrong people? Come on. World is different. The real challengers are agnosticism, atheism, liberalism, humanism, secularism. These are the challenges. With utmost love to our mashayikh back there, they're not going to answer the challenges of secularism. They just can't. We have a different set of challenges. And to rise up to those challenges, you have to have people who have lived in those challenging times and experienced it directly. So just like in Andalus it happened in the past, inshallah, I'm confident, inshallah, that it's going to happen over here. And what we do collectively, all of us, what we do might inshallah ta'ala influence and benefit people around the globe, just like what the ulama of Andalus did, ended up benefiting the ulama around the globe. With that, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us all with ilm that is beneficial, and with a humility, and with akhlaq that is pure and good. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep our hearts clean of any evil and any hiqd, any hasad, and any animosity. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this gathering, to protect our children. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow our children to taste the sweetness of iman and to carry that legacy down to their children after them. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us and our children of those who establish the salah, and who pay the zakah, and who fast the Ramadan, and who have a love for Allah and His Messenger and a respect for the teachings of this faith. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the kalima of La ilaha illallah remains forever in our progeny and their progeny after them. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow all of us to become instruments of good, instruments of khair, instruments of barakah, to allow the legacy of this faith to spread far and wide. And ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to live as Muslims and to die as mu'mins and to be resurrected with the prophets and the righteous, and what a noble companionship they are. And with that, I'll hand it back to our local Shaykh. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
فيا ذلي ويا خجلي إذا ما قال لي ربي أما استحييته تعصيني ولا تخشى من العتب وتخفي الذنب عن خلقي وتأبى في الهوى قربي فتب مما جنيت عسى تعود إلى رضا الرب تعود إلى رضا الرب